All right. Hey, everybody. Wow, it is really bright out here. Okay, I'm going to try to look. I know it's like late in the evening. Things are about to shut down. So I'm going to shut us down with a bang. That's what Ed requested. So today, I'm going to share about something I'm really passionate about, which is end-to-end automated regression testing, specifically with Playwright. I got a woo from somebody. All right, I like it. So testing is important. I am someone who loves testing, so I'm going to share just some of the goodness of this tool called Playwright, which, first of all, has anyone heard or used Playwright? I see three people. All right, maybe four. All right, so this tool is like the new kid or the new tool on the block. So this is like from my era. Yeah, we had posters. My sister did. But yeah, here we are. This is Playwright. I'm going to show you all about the goodness, why I love it, and why you should have it as a tool in your tool belt. So I am Butch Mayhew. Feel free to scan that. If you're curious or you want the repo that I'm using, if you scan that link, it is in the list of links on my link profile. So link, you should have that app. If you don't, you're in Birmingham. It's Birmingham made. All right, so I'm Butch Mayhew. I work at a company called Tild. I used to work at Daxco here in Birmingham, but Tild is a startup. We build payment services for companies processing lots of transactions. And I came in as head of quality, and I quickly put on the head of quality and reliability hat. So I've been balancing these both worlds of how can I test our features from developers, but also keep our sites up and running with observability and all that goodness. So that's who I am, and let's get into the talk. So everybody's automate all the things, right? That's what you all care about, right? All right, automate all the things. All right, yeah, okay. Well, I actually say don't automate all the things, automate all the right things. Because if you try to automate all the things, you're going to waste a lot of money doing it, okay? And a lot of time trying to maintain that automation. So specifically with Playwright or with testing, you want to automate the right things at the right levels, okay? And with Playwright, what I would define that is the API level regression test. So this is HTTP to DB or interface to database, or UI regression, which is DOM to database. So that's the context of where I'm talking about. So these are a little more than health checks. I would say we're going deeper, and we're actually testing the logic of these UIs and APIs. And you can also use this tool for smoke tests. But if you're using this for security testing or performance testing or unit testing, it's not going to be the best tool for the job. So I would argue maybe you shouldn't use that. So specifically, I'm a visual person, so I'm going to try to do this. Let's see if this works. Oh, buddy, look at that right there. All right, so this is the UI, right? We've got the UI that's the front end. We've got JavaScript that does the magic on the front end, and then you've got some API underneath it, right? And after the API, you might have some kind of service that does some additional checks from the API, and then you talk to the database, and you come all the way back up. So in the context of this talk, I'm really talking about all the way from the UI or the API layer, all the way to the database and back up is where we're doing a lot of these checks. So I love visuals, and this is really helpful if people are like, what are you talking about, Butch? This is what I'm talking about. All right, so one caveat or big star is you can't automate away exploratory testing. I've been in QA for 8-9 years now. I'm really passionate about that. So yes, you automate all the API and UI regression tasks, but exploratory testing, it's not going away. Whether it's a dedicated tester doing it or a developer, or a product manager, somebody's got to do it. But you can automate all the boring cases, all the boring test cases, right? So those boring things that, I'll just, confession. I was actually not a fan of QA when 10 years ago, before I knew the awesomeness it could be. I thought QA was coming in and being handed a list of 100 things to go check, and then your job is to go do that. And I'm like, that is not fun. But once I learned about exploratory testing and automating those things, I fell in love with it. And so I would say you can automate the boring checks, right? Those test cases. And I'm a big fan of using automation doing that because it frees me up to apply critical thinking, to test those changes, to look for logic issues, and to do more interesting things, honestly. So let's dive right in. So the agenda today, I'm going to give you an overview of what is Playwright. I'm going to talk about our TILD CI/CD pipeline and how we leverage Playwright in that. And I'm going to give you my top 6 features, like in my opinion, that I use. And I'm going to dive into some code, and we're going to try to do a demo. We'll see if it works. All right, so what is Playwright? Playwright is an open source tool. It's built by Microsoft that enables reliable end-to-end UI and API testing for modern web apps, okay? And I would say this used to just say UI, but over the past 6 months, they added the ability to actually make API tests, so that gets added in here, and that makes me happy. So, couple more stats. It's got 36,000 stars on GitHub. That's not a ton, but that's pretty good for a testing tool. They release new changes around once a month, which is nice, lots of new features. It supports these languages: TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, .NET, Java, and then Ruby and Go. They've got some community implementations there. And if I were to describe it, it's actually closer to Selenium WebDriver than it is Cypress. So if you've heard of Cypress and Selenium and the big battle of all the things, it's actually closer to Selenium WebDriver. And that is because it is an out-of-process automation driver that's not limited by the scope of in-page JavaScript execution. So pretty much what that means is I can drive a browser to do whatever. I can create new windows, I can create new tabs and interact with them, versus Cypress is kind of limited to whatever is inside of it, to the JavaScript. And a fun feature is the test runner is actually built in. So I don't have to take, Selenium, pretty much every Selenium project, you've got Selenium, which is the WebDriver, and you've got to come up with some test runner to wrap around it, right? If it's Ruby, it's going to be RSpec. And you have to instrument that and have a developer, somebody really smart, to put all that together so your testers or other people that may not be as technical, have good frameworks to run their tests in. With Playwright, that runner is built in with a star. I've tested it in TypeScript. I'm not sure about the other languages. So on to TILD's CI/CD pipeline. Are we behind? Can y'all see? Y'all don't see this. Okay. All right, that's where we should be. That's weird. Okay, here we go. If I'm behind, just wave your hands at me. All right, so this is Peacock. This is a robotic peacock that I found on the internet one day. This is what we name our UI automation framework, because peacocks, they eat bugs, and they're really pretty. And one of the caveats of joining the TILD team is all the projects have to be named after birds, okay? So there's the caveat. We also have turkey. The turkey is just a fat, ugly peacock, and it still eats bugs. So we use turkey to test our API services. Okay, so peacock, UI, pretty, turkey, API, ugly. Both very useful. All right, so this is a picture of our API service, Falcon. It's another bird name. So why the bird names? I know everyone's dying to ask. It's because our framework for Falcon, this API service, is built on top of Nest.js, which is the thing. It's got a lot of stars on GitHub as well. I got some claps, okay, yeah. All right, almost a slow clap, that would have been better, but I can take it. All right, so just to walk you through our deployment pipeline, how does a dev get code from their laptops to production? And we'll just walk through this. I'm going to try to use my mouse. Let's see if this works a little better. Okay, oh, it does. All right. So first off, we're going to start down in our develop branch. And first thing a dev's going to do is they're going to merge. They're going to create a feature branch off of develop. They're going to go write some code, make things look pretty. They're going to create a pull request that's going to do a couple things. This is our CI part. We're going to build and run unit tests. We have a preview environment. This is Ufizzy. I probably pronounced it wrong, but there's some guys back here that joined us from Nashville. They have a service where you just give them a Docker Compose file, and they deploy your service and handle all the HTTPS stuff, and it's really nice. So we deploy this preview environment. We have some automation that says once this preview environment's ready, I want you to go kick off my API regression test, and I'm going to give you feedback back on the PR. So we give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down if it passes or fails. The dev peer review is also going on at that time. And once everything passes, we merge that to develop, and that lives in the develop branch maybe an hour, maybe a day or two. It just depends on whenever that dev's ready to merge to master. And we also run our Turkey API automation nightly against that branch as well. And we get our final peer review branch, and then we deploy it to production. So this is kind of our back-end API services. So we also have a very similar service. We're just, instead of uFuzzy in the back end, we're using AWS Amplify to host our front end. FE, Iron, I got it, front end, all right. That's not a bird name, but somehow it slipped through. I don't know. So as Iron, it's the same pretty much workflow. We deploy to Amplify. We kick off our UI automated regression tests, which is that crazy robotic turkey, and we get feedback. So this is real-time feedback all the time, and it's really helpful because we want to know, we want to keep develop in a always shippable state, right? So this gives us the feedback the devs, the testers need to know, hey, are we confident in actually releasing this code that we just wrote, right? All right, I'm not going to take questions. I'm going to keep going. All right, so this is our GitHub Actions file for Playwright. So by default, what's really nice with Playwright, this is one of the things I promised in my talk, that you'd have a YAML file. If you have Playwright installed and you do an npx or npm playwright init, you'll actually create a base project and you'll get this YAML file out of the box, which is really nice. But it's pretty basic. All it's doing is it's getting a node, it is installing all the dependencies in the package.json file. It's installing Playwright, which installs any browsers that you need, and then it runs whatever test you have in the test folder. And then it saves the results, so you can go view them later if you need to. You can do a lot more fun stuff with this, like post it to a web page and whatnot, but out of the box, this is what you get. All right, so I'm going to go over, in my opinion, the top 6 Playwright features as of today. And I say as of today is because they're releasing monthly, and I have new favorites when they come out. So we're going to jump in. This is the part of the demo, so you'll bear with me. Hopefully things work. This is going to be a 4-for-1. So we're going to demo through 4 different things. We're going to look at reporters. So when a test runs, how do you know if things passed or failed? Which comes with videos on failure by default. We're also going to talk a little bit about retries, which is in the testing community, people will be like, retries, you shouldn't be doing that. But when you're working with UIs and sometimes flaky UIs or flaky services, like sometimes retries maybe aren't the best, or maybe they are helpful. I'll just leave it at that. And then workers. So can you run these tests in parallel, right? So the more we can run in parallel, the better. All right, so here we go. Let's go look at a report. We'll start here. All right, so I'm actually going to look at Playwright report. Here we go. So in the demo I'm using, hopefully I'm connected to the internet. We'll see. Let's just make sure. Oh, buddy. I'm connected. I failed everyone with the live demo. All right, we're just going to jump into looking at a local report because we can do that. So this is an example of a report that I ran before I came up here, and let me just generate another one. Oh, it's not going to talk to the internet, so let's not do that. Okay, so this is a report that I ran. It did run, and you'll actually see 2 interesting things. Here, let me zoom in a little bit so we can see this a little better. First is on my UI login test, I actually have this failure. And on this UI register user spec, I actually have this like warning sign, which actually means flaky, which means the first one didn't pass, and I did a retry, and it passed. So we're going to look at the login test first. And the way I've written this test is it's supposed to fail. So this is like for the demo purposes. You can see run number 1 and run number 2 are listed quite nicely. They're actually the same failure. And if I scroll down, I see some pretty cool a lot of information about what the test is, what ran, why did it fail, where did it fail. Typically, there's a screenshot right here, which apparently there's not one right there. And there should be a video. Ooh, I know actually why that's not working. Here, let me do this. MPX. Show report. All right, there it goes. All right, this is a local one. So actually ignore the retracts. That one is an old one. But if I go look at this login error, let me zoom in here. And I'm going to scroll down to, this is the page. This is the screenshot of where it failed. And I'm going to scroll down, and I'm actually going to look at the video, which comes out of the box, which is amazing. Like for Selenium, like you have to write a whole bunch of code. Now this is very quick because it loads the page. It inputs some credentials, and it tries to click the login button, and it fails. And if I scroll back up to the error, this will tell me why. So this is like very, very good error messaging. This tells me that locator.click, error, strict mode violation, text equals login, resolved to 4 elements. So what that tells me is on my text.login page, which this is the screenshot, login resolved to 4 different places. So if I count login, I count a login here, I count a login here, I count a login button here, and there's probably another one somewhere. But what this also tells me is, hey, which login do you want to use? Do you want to use the title? This is what you can use to find that locator. So it's kind of like a smart locator. If you want to use the login link, you should use this link that has text of signup/login. If you want to use this H2 header, log into your account, you can use that if you want to make some assertions on that maybe. Or if you want to click the button, you should probably just use this Playwright button has text login. So if I go back to my test and go look at where it failed right here, looking for text login. If I were to comment that out and uncomment out this has button, this would fail. Or let's see if we can try the internet again. Nope, that's not gonna work. Hey, it did work. All right, cool. So this is the test site that I'm working on. You'll notice these big white blank spaces. Like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I don't know, whoever developed the site, they decided to put Google ads on here. So it kind of messed up my automation pretty bad. So I've got more code in here that says, hey, if you get any Google ad messages, just block those, don't resolve them. So my test would actually pass. But let's go back over here. So I'm gonna try to run this again. PX Playwright test. And this is gonna run the whole suite of tests. And you can see in this output, which we should get all green, it's running 10 tests using 2 workers. So one of the things I wanted to call out are workers. So this is running 2 of those tests in parallel with each other. And, oh, it's going. There it goes. Just thinking about it. So real quick, just to show off some of the stuff. Ooh, it's not happy. I'm gonna blame it on the flaky internet, but I could be wrong. So you didn't give me a wired connection up here, Ed. What were you thinking? Yeah, okay. In his defense, it did not say wired connection. He just said HDMI port. So we're good, we're good. So I'm gonna dive into the config. So this is the Playwright config, and this is what gives me the options to do other things, right? If I wanted to change the Chromium browser to use Firefox or something like that, I could add that here, or I could add that as an array and actually test against multiple browsers. This also gives me the option to increase the workers. So maybe by default, I actually want to run 4 in parallel. Or if I'm running against like a Hosva machine that has like 20 cores, maybe I jack that up to like 20 at a time and get that faster feedback. One thing that I'm not going to show off that they actually do support is sharding those off as well. So let's say you have 1,000 tests, you can shard those off and run 100 tests across 10 different servers and still get that feedback. All right, so it looks like things are failing, which is unfortunate, but it's okay. It's running. That accounts for something. All right, so other thing I wanted to talk about is retries. So sometimes when you have flaky internet or flaky infrastructure, retries can be helpful, and this allows you to do that, and it will call out if it passes after a retry, it'll mark a test flaky versus like just passing or just failed. And I showed you videos. I'll show you one other really cool thing. once this test is done, and that is the trace file that actually comes out of this reporting. So if you've ever used Cypress before, there's this nice, you can kind of step through the test and see everything that happened. Well, Playwright gives you that same availability. So let's jump into the register new user spec, and it looks like this one failed because it timed out after 10 seconds. So we're not going to look at that one. Let's go look at one that failed the first time and it passed on the second time. So if I look at this failed run, I can come back in here and see the trace file and actually try to see what actually happened. So this trace file is basically everything that you get, not everything, but a lot of things you get in Google DevTools, you have access to here. So here I can actually see the call that was made, the headers, the detail that were sent, and if there's any error messages from front end, you'll see that here, and you can also see network requests if they're successful. So really, really helpful in debugging, and it's really nice if you wire this up to your CI, where if things fail, you can go look at a report and troubleshoot really quick on what happened, why it happened, and either talk to a developer or talk to an SRE about their stuff being flaky, or talk to the conference host about their internet. So I love you guys, actually, so sorry. All right, I'm going to stop beating that dead horse. Here we go. All right, so what's also really cool with this is, I guess this was 2 to 3 months ago, they actually released a VS Code extension. So what that allows you to do is run your test within the context of where you're writing your code, which is always a great thing. So if I pull up Visual Studio, you'll notice this nice little test tube, or I don't know, test bottle. I don't know what you call that. But from here, I can run test, or I can even debug a test just by clicking a play button or a debug button. If I have a debugger, it'll actually pause it and let me step through and see, what's actually happening under the covers, what are the variables that are being set, et cetera. So we've got some more flakiness. That is what it is. Probably timeouts. All right. So, but that makes me really happy. And it also makes me happy that the developer docs are really, really strong. So if you go to playwright.dev, there's a great intro, and then there's great docs for anybody to get started with really good examples. And I guess what makes me really, really happy is I can run my API automation and my UI automation in the same framework. What that also allows me to do is use my API to actually generate data for my UI test, right? So traditionally, if I was running a UI test and I wanted to create a new member and I want to go do something with that member, I'd have to log into the UI, go through the steps, find all the forums, input all the information, hit submit, get that ID, and then go do something with it. But what this framework allows me to do, being able to make API calls, is I can go quickly make an API post to go create a user, get an ID back, and then go to the UI and step through any of the UI things I want to check. So those are in my opinion, these are the top Playwright features that make me smile and really happy. So there we are. So great. All right. So here we go. We're going to log it. We are going to jump into a UI spec. So we're going to go look at some code base. And I noticed that we got some time. Okay, this is good. Are y'all in? Are y'all tracking with me? All right, cool. All right. Just want to make sure. All right. So let's go look at a UI check. So let's see. I think this is zoomed in enough. Let me make this little. All right, I think that's readable. So first thing we got is we are importing our test and expect. So this is from the Playwright library. This is TypeScript, so if you don't know what's going on, it's still pretty easy to follow. I'm also importing a data factory user. So as I mentioned, like Playwright allows me to make API calls as well. And with this website, there's an API that lets me create users. So I'm leveraging that, and I've created a fixture that I can call from any of my tests that will come in and use the base URL plus this path, pass in some headers, I'll pass in a form, which I set up here with all this fancy testy McTester stuff. And I get a response, and I return the username, or I can return an ID, or I can return the whole body and parse that myself. For this scenario, I just wanted to create a user and get the name back. The reason for that is I'm setting a hard-coded password. So my test knows by this environment variable that I've got in another file that this password's always going to be the same. All I need is a username, use the existing password, and you should be able to log in. So the beginning of my test, I've got this big describe block. So this is very similar to Ruby or RSpec. I'm going to describe what I'm doing. So I'm describing this endpoint, and I think this is actually this is the UI. So I'm going to hit the login page. I'm going to create a user. I'm going to set my username variable to whatever comes back from that API. And then this is where I do some remove the Google ads, basically, because those exist. And then I go down here. So we're going to look at that at the end of the test. And then my test section actually starts here, and it starts with successfully log in. So that's my expectation. I'm going to pass in my page and my base URL. Those are things specific to Playwright. So page gives me access to drive the browser, okay? So we're going to wait. The page, the browser, is going to go to this base URL /login. And then using these locators, there's some data-QA locators on the screen. I'm able to find those and just fill those, right? So I'm going to find the login email. I'm going to fill it with the username. I'm going to find the login password, fill it with the password, and then I'm going to click the login button. Now, here's the thing. I've worked with a lot of people that are like, all right, we're done. We made the browser do some magical things. The truth is, you don't have a test until you do some side of assertion. So this part is probably the most critical. Make sure that, once that is done, expect the locator header to contain text logged in as testy. So testy McTester, that's who that is. So that's the test. And then after this test is done, it's actually going to go use this data factory method that I've created, which is going to delete the user. So I pass in a existing username, and it's just going to go and delete the account. And I've run my test, I've cleaned up my data, I've kept it all nice, and everybody's really happy, I hope. Or at least I'm going to get really good feedback from what's going on. So when I talk about data factory, that's actually a pretty, I guess, what I would say about test automation, the hardest problem I've actually ever seen is it's not really getting the browser to go click a bunch of things. The hardest problem is creating a test data strategy, right? Where are you going to get this data from? How are you going to create it? How are you going to clean it up? How are you going to make sure it's, the database is always in a state where this test is going to pass? And, you don't want to create flaky tests and give us false feedback that things failed when actually everything's fine. So to do that, this data factory that I use is very important in that strategy. And one thing that I like to call out, or I like to think about is, our tests ideally need to start as close to the finish line as possible, okay? What that means is whatever data you need, whether it's inserting directly to the database or making an API call, you want to start as close to that test as you can. So when you're pulling up the UI, you're not doing 15 steps before you need to, right? You're just doing the one thing you want to test, validate it, make your assertions, and then shut it down, and then go on to the next one. That keeps your tests small, and it also allows them, hopefully, if you're building it right, to run in parallel, right? You don't ever want test one to be reliant on test 2 or 3 or 4. I've done that. Mistakes were made. It was 74 reliable tests. It was bad. It was really bad. But that's another talk for another day. But if you think about test automation and using the data factory in your testing or some kind of data instrumentation, it's a lot like a cooking show, right? You've got all your ingredients are ready for you, and all you got to do is pour them in, start mixing them up, and go testing, right? So when you think about testing, especially like interface to database or DOM to database, think about that test data problem. I don't have data, I wish I did, but my guess is that's the reason most test automation projects fail. That's my hunch. All right. So let's see, do we have time? We have time, all right? We're gonna look at a API spec real quick. So we looked at a UI spec, what happens when I'm testing the UI. The API is pretty simple as well. If you're familiar with HTTP requests, this should be really straightforward. I'm importing the same test and expect. I have the same describe. I'm actually gonna describe the whole endpoint path here, which is gonna print out really nice in my report. I'm gonna create my body. So of course, this is stuff that I could put off in a fixture if I needed to, just to create a body, especially if I'm doing 15 or 16 different iterations of the same test against the same endpoint. I wanna dry up this code and make it as easy as possible to use and to reuse. But for these purposes, we're not doing that. I create a username, I got a password, and I think before all, the first thing I'm actually doing is, if I'm deleting a user, I've got to know the system. I actually have to have a user to be able to delete one. So the first thing I do is I go and create a user through this API call. I validate that, hey, this user is created, and then so this is before all. So before any tests are run, I'm gonna go create that user. And then when this test runs, it's going to delete the user. So it's gonna bring in the username and password. It's gonna make a delete call. This is not the best written API either when you see these response codes, but it makes a delete call, and I'm expecting the status to be 200, the response code to be 200, and then the body message to include account deleted. And down here, I do a JSON schema assertion. So this doesn't come with Playwright, but it's something anytime I've done API testing, I want to make sure that my schemas didn't change, or if they did change, I want to kind of give it the thumbs up, or I want it to alert me if something's changed. So I use this validate JSON schema check to actually do that. So I'll take, do y'all know what the JSON schema is? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, a lot of people, that's great. So we get a JSON schema, I save it as a snapshot, which it actually lives up here. So this would be an example of the JSON schema snapshot. When the test runs, it goes and gets whatever the response is, it creates a schema, and then it compares the two. So it tells me, hey, did something change? And I ask the question, was that on purpose or not on purpose? And it gives us visibility and feedback into changes, especially if you are dealing with multiple services, right? This is an exposed API. If something changes and it's a breaking change, right? We want to surface that to the devs, give them that feedback they need. So, other services downstream don't go down. All right, so that is a delete user spec. And then, I think that's all I got for the demo. Let's see what else we got. Some best practices. All right, we'll leave y'all with this. Write independent automated tests. So remove as many dependencies as possible. Tests should never share data between themselves, right? So if you've got 5 tests in a file, each of those 5 tests should have their own test data either created or, if you use the golden copy method, that's another way to do it, right? But don't share a test, that's bad. All right, so that means setting up data via API calls. That's the best way I've found to do that. Utilize static data when absolutely necessary. So sometimes you're not gonna be able to create all the data, right? Sometimes you need a base client or a base customer or some kind of admin to exist. Use static data for that. But what I would say is make sure you have a way to either seed that to a database or to create that. So when you spin up a new environment or you've got an ephemeral environment, you can go create that data real quick and run your automation against it. You also want to leave the data in the same way, basically leave the state the same way you found it. This is typically like back in Selenium days, when you do something with the browser, maybe you log out or you log into a session and the next test accepted that. You don't want to do that. Playwright does that for us. Every time I call page on a new context and a new test, it actually creates a new browser session for us. So I don't have to worry about, this browser has some other cookie that would break another test. But that's something to think about if you're not using Playwright. You also want to create reusable methods and functions. So I showed an example of Data Factory, but you can also do that with the page object model for your UI test. And I would emphasize if number one is true, right, if all your tests are independent, you should be able to run all your tests in parallel, which is going to make you faster, right? All right, and just one thing to iterate is the goal of the suite and what I'm talking about really is to catch regressions, right? So the idea is, you don't want to make the system worse, so you want to prove that the system is not worse than it was before. So it's giving that confidence that we can actually go to production with high confidence on a Friday afternoon. Yes, deploy on Fridays. All right, so just a website that I've started working on. So as I've jumped into Playwright, they have a nice Slack channel. As questions get asked and I learn new things, I've been documenting those here at playwrightsolutions.com. So I don't know, that's a fun little side project. I work at Tilde. We are also hiring like all the rest of the world, but hey, we're in the same boat. And feel free to connect with me if you haven't. That's it.
Thank you, Butch. Anybody have any questions for Butch? Oh, we got one in front.
Question man.
Yeah. Have you ever looked at Puppeteer, and how does it compare to Playwright if you have?
Yeah, so Puppeteer, a lot of the developers of Puppeteer work on the Playwright team. So it's using a lot of Puppeteer under the covers.
Cool.
Any other questions?
You can yell it out to me and I'll repeat it.
Go ahead, you can yell.
Have you seen Playwright used in like a canary process before, or tried that?
Yeah, so the question was, have I seen Playwright used in a canary process? No, I haven't. It's still pretty new. Yes, we should try that. Heck yeah. That would be a great, it can do anything a user can do. You just have to program it to do that. So, maybe we do that. Let's put that as a task in our backlog. All right.
So on your docs or your code, there were some challenges in there, API challenges. Where did you get those from? Like, was that from that automation exercise site or something? Like, it looks like it was a puzzle or something like that you were doing.
Maybe. I think so. I'm not sure of your question.
Oh, I mean, if you want to bring your code back up, it was like a comment in there. It's like API challenge.
Oh, yes.
12 or something.
Okay, yeah. Your question was looking at my delete section. Yes, good call. The question was maybe not in the delete. Yeah, API challenge.
Yeah, there you go.
So automation exercise, like this website. We'll see if it works again. This guy, whoever created it, or gal, I'm not sure. Created this website, and he does have a list of like, hey, here's some different things you can try to automate as a tester. So there's a big list of challenges, and yeah, I just made some comments so I didn't forget.
Yeah, it was neat. It was very neat.
Any other questions? Can I say one other thing?
Sure.
Just thank you for all the people running the sound and clicking, unmuting people. Yes, thank everybody. Give them a round of applause. If I had flowers, I'd give them.